Well, folks, it looks like Bonnie is no longer here with us. It seems that Gordon the Big Engine was really the final straw that broke his back, and he was just like, "I'm not doing the railway series anymore." So welcome to Sakura the Diesels. Tier list of
I'm
the railway.
alive, son of a bitch.
Yes. Actually, no. Bonnie is here with us. Hey, everyone! Welcome to the really useful podcast and everything. So, if you guys already know, we just basically finished up season 1 of the Railway series and everything. We pretty much reviewed all 9 books, the first 8 books and everything, and the one spin-off book, Thomas's Christmas Party, in season 1. And like we said in the last episode of Going to Big Engine, this experiment was very fun for us. We definitely had a lot of fun, reviewing all 9 books and everything, giving them our thoughts and everything. It was quite the journey, and like I said, I'm looking forward to what the next season is going to offer for us.
Yes, it was a fun experience to do. It was a fun little project to do. I was a little bit hesitant to do it as well. Sako and I were a little bit hesitant because it was going to be non-scripted, and we were kind of a little bit nervous because we were not very good at doing non-scripted things. But we just gave it a try, and surprisingly, it worked. We had a lot of fun doing it.
We did. I think what made it work is that basically you and me bounced off on ideas. We bounced off on what we truly felt about each story and everything, and it definitely helped us form a better, definitely helped form us a better opinion and thoughts on how do we truly feel about this book critical wise and everything. Is it a really good book? Go ahead.
We were harsh on some of the books. And that's
Yes.
actually pretty good from a critical point of view, because if we were to base them on this book is too good to be considered bad, then I think the podcast would have been a little bit different.
It definitely would have been
than-
biased. It definitely would have been very biased at that point. Because
Yes.
from that point, it's not really us offering honest opinions. It's just us, being Thomas fans and being blinded by okay, is this book actually worth reading? Is this book actually worth reading for someone that's not a Thomas fan, or is it just basically a waste of time?
and that worked with some of the books we reviewed because we were harsh on some of them. We were very
Pretty
harsh with
much,
some of
and
them.
we're definitely going to be seeing them because, as you can see, as we promised in the last episode, we're going to be basically ranking all the 9 books that we reviewed up until this point in season 1 and everything, and this one's going to be very interesting. So like we said in the last episode, the final grades that we did give to the first 9 books, the first time we review them. Some of them might not be the final grade. Some of them might, move a little bit as we go on and everything. And actually, that's going to be very true once we get to, once we start reviewing more books, once we start, basically reviewing, once we start reviewing, other books and everything along the series. Some of the books I reviewed in the past might change as we go along and everything. But it also does depends, too.
So this tier list is going to be evolving as we go along in each season. We'll be updating it at the end of every season. So let's say at the end of season 2, when we finish with branch line engines, then we'll come back and then we'll update it, and we'll keep going until we get to the final tier list, which will be at the end of season 6.
Pretty much. So basically, as you can see right here, we have a tier list. I have my own tier list. It's Bonnie's tier list right over here. And basically, what we're going to be doing is that we're each one by one for each of us. We're each going to take turns, basically giving our short and sweet, opinion on basically all the 9 books that we reviewed up to this point and everything, and just basically give our true final thoughts on each of these books. How good were each of these books, looking back and comparing them to the books that we have read up until this point of season 1. Are they still good? Were we being biased? Were we being harsh? Or were our thoughts, actually genuine, and do we still feel the same way whenever we think about these books from now on?
All right. So before we get, I should preface this by saying that Sakoa has already his grades ready. I'm gonna be doing this live because I felt like if I gave them away early, then it wouldn't work. So I decided, you know what? Since we're recording, might as well do it live.
Yes. So yeah, basically as you said, like I have my grades picked out and everything. It still could change. Like there could be a point where maybe like Barney could like persuade me to move like one book down or one book above like a grade in of itself and everything. But the way that this is going to work, we're basically each going to take turns ranking the books one by one as we go along. So, for example, I'm going to give my grade for 3 railway engines, as when Barney's going to give his grade for the same book. And it's just basically going to be, that's basically how we're going to grade each of these books until we get to the last one, Gordon the Big Engine. And so yeah, we're basically going to be going in order by, like, episode release.
Yeah. Don't be surprised if there's a book that one of us may like, but the other doesn't like it as much as the other person. So yes. Don't be surprised, guys.
Alrighty, so you ready to get this tier list to go?
Yep, let's get this show on the road.
Alrighty. So we have our very first book right here, The 3 Railway Engines. And for the very first book, alright, so for the very first book of the Railway series, and the book that basically started it all, it's still a decent book in my opinion. Yes, it is very simple to a fault and such, probably even, too simple compared to, like, what the other Railway series books are going to offer for us. But it is a very good starting point to where, like, it's basically a very good starting point to where Wilbur is going to take this series as we go further down the line. There are still some themes in the first story that basically carries over in the other series outside of, like, talking engines. There's also still the themes about, like, basically, don't talk back to others or otherwise, like, karma's gonna bite you in the ass and everything. Basically, don't also be like, a spoiled brat and everything. Always help out others, be kind, all that other, good stuff and everything. We even get to see, the first 3 engines, growing as characters. Like, this is the book where we get introduced to, like, Edward, Gordon, and Henry. And basically, out of the characters in the book and everything, Edward is still a good character. There's still a solid, there's a solid introduction to him in the first 2 stories. And Gordon also has a really good, introduction, too, with his story, spending his time with Edward and all that. Henry's introduction was okay and everything, but I think what really killed it and everything in terms of, like, because, again, we also had to keep in mind, when this book was released, Audrey did not have the idea of having, putting 4 stories into one book. As Barney mentioned, he was originally going to have these stories separate and such, and the engines were going to be on different railways. So with keeping that in mind and everything, like, while the final story is good and everything, and it actually does, build a little bit more into Henry's character and everything, Henry's character, in my opinion, doesn't really get as much of a strong opening as of yet and everything. I mean, it's still a good start, but not as, like, in some ways it is memorable when you actually kind of think about it. Because also, like we said, this is also the book, or at least a story, where, like, the BBC wanted to adapt this first into their television project, and we all know how that turned out in the end and everything. But even for the simple fact that they wanted to do a sad story of Henry, and, like, as the first episode,
it was so good that they actually wanted to do it. Nah, just kidding. It was so bad that it even overshadowed a fucking murder trial.
Yeah, we do know that. But even then, like, just for the fact that, like, they wanted to use this episode as, like, their basis for trying out a Thomas TV series and everything, actually does speak volume on how well people remember this story to this day. And I mean, some could say that it's a good sign, some could say that it's a bad sign and everything. But keeping this in mind and everything, the book is still decent. It's still a decent start to where the Railway series is going to go. So for that, I'm going to put it into C tier, actually. First 2 stories are still pretty good. I will still read them from time to time. And the last 2 stories, again, while maybe not as grand and everything, there are still some good and funny moments for, like, for what all of these stories has to offer and everything. And I still think this is a really solid start to, like, what's gonna be coming down, what's basically going to be coming, once we start reading, once we start basically getting into more books as the years goes on.
All right. So as for me, if I could put it in C minus, I would have loved to, but since we don't have a C minus, I'm gonna have to put it in D. And I think D is the best place I will put 3 railway engines on, and let me explain why. It's a good start, I agree. but it's a little bit too simple for my taste. And I actually remember why I actually didn't like this book when I first started reading the Railway series as a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically too simple to the point where it's not really.
It doesn't really feel. It doesn't really feel complete in a sort of sense.
Exactly.
And
However,
again,
the story.
and again, I was just gonna say, like, it also doesn't help that, again, like, Audrey, at first Audrey had no intention of, like, putting all these stories together in the same book. So I think that also helps in, like, because also when you think about it, the stories do kind of feel episodic in a sort of way. Like, it doesn't really feel like, outside of the last story, because, like, that's what the publishers wanted and everything. It doesn't really feel like, the book is basically complete, where you basically feel like, each story does have a connection to each other. Outside of the first two stories, because, like, Edward's Day Out and Edward and Gordon, you actually need them together. But then when you get the sad story of Henry and everything, like, it does feel, it actually does feel, I wouldn't say the story doesn't necessarily feel not needed and such, but it definitely does feel like
it feels like filler.
Basically, yeah. It feels like, filler. It feels like, it really has nothing to do with the book itself overall. Outside of the, like, outside of the fact that it's just like, here's Henry, the third entrant in the story and everything, and that's basically about it.
Yeah. For the reason I put it on D, and I know some fans are going to kill me for that, is because compared to the rest of the books, this is one that I don't see myself returning to unless I'm, like, extremely bored to read the entire Railway series again, and then I'll go back to it. But this is not not one of the books where I will return over and over again. I still think Edward's Day Out and Edward and Gordon and Edward Gordon and Henry. God damn it! I tried saying that 3 times. I still think those 3 stories are classic, but the sad story of Henry still doesn't work for me. I think the story is just a waste of time.
Yeah, to be honest, I do agree, and I do see where you're coming from and everything. The reason I more put it in C and everything is just more that, like, again, it's the first story and everything, and, like, there's some first stories and first books. It's not as bad, but I do agree that, like, comparing it to later books and everything, it is one of those books where it's just, like, it's kind of hard going back to when there are better books in the Railway series that you could be reading right now.
Pretty much, and another reason I put it in D, if I would put it in C minus if there was a C minus, but I think putting it in D would be the safest spot for me. It's not the worst. It's not when we finish this entire series. I bet it's gonna be ranked higher, but don't worry because it's nowhere near the bottom. Don't even think about it. It's nowhere near the bottom.
Yeah,
there's much worse books than this.
Yes, I do agree with you wholeheartedly. All right.
Yeah. So that's why I put it in. So that's why I put it in D. I think D is the safest spot I can put it.
Alrighty. All right. So with that, let's move on to Thomas the Tank Engine. I'm already putting in S. It's an S. No doubt about it. You can't fight me on this. The Railway Series Book Club put it in the best. For the second story, Audrey nailed this one right out of the park. No doubt about it and such. And just the thing, this book was made all because Christopher wanted a model of Gordon, and basically Audrey was just like, well, how about a tank engine instead? And because Chris loved it so much and he wanted a story, you can tell that, like, Audrey really put a lot of passion into this book just to basically, like, he basically wanted to make this book solely for his son, for him to enjoy over and over again. And because they did that, we the readers, Again, there's a reason why Thomas is the main star of his show. Like, when you read these stories, it definitely has everything that, like, the Railway series will be known for. Basically, a book that focuses on one character and everything. That character goes through an arc and everything. And with Thomas's arc, you definitely feel like it's an arc. You definitely do feel him growing and maturing as a character as it goes along. All the stories are still fun to read. Thomas and Gordon is a very good introduction to Thomas himself as a character. Thomas's Train is still a very fun story for me just to see, Thomas messing up and, like, trying to pull coaches for the first time. Thomas and the Trucks has, like, that epic runaway and everything where you do feel the attention building up and everything. And then Thomas and the Breakdown Train, it is still a very good ending to basically see Thomas growing, maturing, and I still feel that satisfaction when he finally gets his own branch line. It definitely felt earned for him and everything. Which is basically, when we get to the other books in this lineup and everything, pretty much most of these books, I would say, except for maybe like one or so, basically don't really capture that same satisfactory feel when it comes to their endings compared to this book. And again, just the fact that people still remember this book to this day, hell, they still remember something like, the illustrations to this day and everything, speaks volume to how good this book really is. And I really can't give this much more praise that I already can. So yeah, it's an S. No doubt about it.
You can literally purchase this book for your kids if you have kids, and it will be perfect because it has a proper beginning, middle, and end.
It does. It definitely does have a proper beginning, middle, and end. And each of the stories, like, once it gets to the very last story, each of the ending to each of those stories, makes you want to read more. It makes you want to basically know what's going to happen next and everything. Is Thomas basically going to go out and see the world like as before were promised and such? How's he going to get there and such?
Pretty much. Okay, so as for me, let's begin by saying that, let's be honest and say this book is a little bit overrated. Let's be honest.
Overrated. Yes, but go ahead. Go ahead before I have.
But does that affect my rating of S tier? Absolutely not. This book is a fucking S tier. This book possibly might be the only perfect book on my list. It has a proper beginning. This book feels like it has a proper beginning, middle, and end, and you really feel that Thomas grows as a character throughout the book. You start at the beginning where he is a cocky shithead, then you move on forward to Thomas's train where he's still a cocky shithead, but he wants to learn, and then we move on to Thomas's trucks where his cocky shithead side has gone away, and he really, really wants to learn. And then when we get to Thomas in the breakdown train, he finally matures, and his bravery shows that he's grown as a character. What better book can you ask about Thomas? This is the creme de la creme book for Thomas. All 4 stories are perfect, and it feels like this is like a movie quadrilogy. One of the rare perfect movie quadrilogies. If Thomas the Tank Engine were to be a movie, it will be perfect from beginning to end.
Well, technically it was a movie. It was just more of a direct-to-DVD movie.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if Thomas the Tank Engine were to be a quadrilogy series, then it will be perfect from beginning to end.
It would. It definitely would. I definitely do agree with you on that part.
Yeah, so I don't have too much to say on Thomas the Tank Engine. It's one of the rare perfect books that's gonna be on S tier.
Yeah, same here. Honestly, looking at the lists past, Gordon the Big Engine, I think there might be one more book, at least to me, that might also get an S, maybe 1 or 2, but I'm basically gonna save that for later, just in case if I basically change my mind once we start reviewing those books.
Oh, and I also forgot to mention, if people sometimes ask me who's your favorite character of the TV show or the railway series, it's obviously Thomas. Thomas has been my favorite character ever since I became a Thomas fan. So yeah,
Thomas is definitely up there as one of my favorite characters too.
Yeah, behind another character that we're gonna get to in a few minutes, but we'll save that for a few minutes later. So go ahead, next.
Yeah, James the Red Engine. All right, so I'll be honest, for James the Red Engine, this is one of those books where I keep getting split on like what should be a better rating for it, because on the one hand I want to put it in D tier and such because when you get down to it, the stories are harmless and everything. There's nothing really in it that's, like, bad or worse. There's nothing really in it where it's, like, it's terrible writing, per se, and everything. But that also kind of makes me want to put it into F. Because even though the writing itself is not terrible, it's also not that great either. It's one of those books where basically, while you don't hate to read it, you basically know that you can get more out of this book and everything. And also with the fact that, like, Audrey himself didn't like this book when it came out and everything, also doesn't help. Basically giving what kind of rating I feel this book should get and such. So, alrighty, you know what? I thought about this long and hard. I'm gonna stick it in F for now. This could change and everything, but The reason why I'm putting it into F category is that, much like what we said when we reviewed this book is trying to be Thomas the Tank Engine, but the reason why Thomas the Tank Engine itself worked and everything is that you felt that, like, there was an arc, you felt that, like, there was a character growth going on as the stories, goes on. But with James the Red Engine and everything, yeah, there's a little bit of growth once you get to, like, Troublesome Trucks and everything. But even with Troublesome Trucks, and even when you get to the last story, James and the Express, you don't get that same satisfactory feel that you think that James has learned his lesson, or that you think he's earned what he has earned in the end. And I still feel that way whenever I read this book. The first two stories are just basically filler, is what it is. Like, they do set up a good introduction to James and everything, but it also just more. Again, a Very Serious Book Club, brings us up in a good light and everything, but it really does feel like you're not really learning more about James. You're just basically traveling with James, and just,
this doesn't feel like Thomas the Tank Engine. It kind of feels like it feels like Wilbur wanted to focus on James, but he didn't have the time to do so because he was rushed to write this book.
Yes, pretty much. And you can basically tell in each of these stories that, like, each of these stories that James is involved in, then he really doesn't speak as much as he does in this book and everything. He doesn't really he doesn't really get a chance to emote or react what is happening around him and everything. In which the TV series just one of the few times where I think, like, the TV series actually does a much better job in, like, trying to show James as a character and everything. Whereas in the book, like, because Audrey and, C. Reginald Dalby are basically limited to, like, how many illustrations they could draw on each page and everything. It really does suffer that, like, because we don't get to see James's reaction to what's basically happening around him and everything. You don't really get the same feeling of him growing as a character the same way that you do with Thomas. And because of that, at least to me, in my opinion, you don't really get the satisfactory that, like, this book is complete, or that, like, this book basically feels like, James has gone through a character arc. It just felt like you were just reading a book about James doing shit. He gets into trouble, and then he basically gets forgiven in the end and everything. And that's really about it. And it also doesn't help that the book is also doesn't help with the final story. That the final story fucking sucks hard. No, it does. It really does suck, because, again, unlike with Thomas and the Breakdown Train and everything, James never really he sort of earns it, but that's only because that, like, the Singleman fucked up, and, like, the passengers suddenly don't want Gordon anymore and everything, because, yeah, of course, it's Gordon's fault that he's on the loop line and everything. So Tom Harris just, like, alright, well, how about I give you James then? As Bonnie said and everything, like, it was really just more luck that James got to pull the Express. And because of that, again, it doesn't really feel. I don't really get the same satisfactory feel that, like, James has actually earned. It's basically earned, like, the job that he has right now, and that, like, pulling the Express, or basically just learning overall as a character.
I honestly don't feel proud for James at the end of that story. Honestly,
yeah.
The U.S.
I mean, in some ways I feel happy, but, like, I don't. Yeah, but yeah, I also don't get the same satisfactory, proud feeling that I did with Thomas.
Am I supposed to feel happy that he got to pull the Express? I guess, because I don't feel happy. I just feel confused when reading that story.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't really feel more confused. I just really feel more that, like, okay, I guess that was the book then. I mean, technically it is a book. There's a beginning, middle, and end, but there's no meat. But there's no meat to this book.
There's basically no cheese in that sandwich. In other words.
Yeah. It's just that's basically what it is. It's just basically, like, a waiter giving you a sandwich, and the only sandwich you're getting is just the bread itself. And basically, you just eat the sandwich. It's like, well, I mean, kind of a sandwich, but you're missing a lot of stuff in this. And that's what this book feels like.
You're missing pretty much. And I agree. This book is an F for me.
Yeah.
It's not the worst F on today's list, because there's another F on my list. But this is not like the worst F on the list. It's bad. It's not terrible either. The reason I put it in F is because it's structured horribly, and it doesn't feel like James got the proper spotlight that he deserved. And it doesn't help that Wilbur was rushed to meet the deadline when writing this book, and it really shows.
It does. It really does show.
And aside from the first two stories, the third story for me is a complete waste of time. I was having a hard time trying to read it. I basically couldn't finish Troublesome Trucks. That story to me is still a waste of time.
Yeah, actually, you know, it also doesn't help that basically Johnny Morris basically skips a few pages in that story. I think even he took a look at that story and it was just like, there's really nothing in here for me to do.
It drags on that even Johnny Morris skipped the page.
So you know we have a bad story. You know we have a bad story and a bad book right here. And even Johnny Morris is just like, yeah, no, this is more filler. Fuck this.
So that's why I put it in F. It's not the worst F on this list, but you know, it's still compared with the rest, it's kind of bad in a sort of way. So yeah, that's why I put James the Red Engine on F.
Alrighty. Well, in the fourth book, we go back to Thomas again, literally called Tengen Thomas again. And Tengen Thomas again. So Tengen Thomas again. It's still a very good book. Actually, this book is definitely a much better step up to, like, you know, James the Red Engine, where we get to see Thomas then on his branch line, and basically this is another story where basically Audrey delivers what he says in the fort, and that, like, you know, when you see Thomas's branch line, you're going to have fun, and he definitely brought up a lot of fun with this branch line and everything. You know, Thomas leaving the guard behind, Thomas gets fish in his boiler and everything, Thomas tears in the snow, that's still a classic right there. And of course, Thomas and Birdie, that wonderful, fantastic race. All these stories are still fun to read to this day. That, like, you know, it's really hard to, like, be negative towards this book. It's still a very fun story. This is the book. This is a prime example of how you could do a slice of life, you know, story just right and everything. You don't have to make it too epic, but still make it fun enough to where, like, you know, you basically enjoy reading this book, that you want to read it again and again and again, and that's what this book delivers, and that's what this book really does a very solid job. Now, I wouldn't put this
book, if I may, sorry.
I know, I was just basically going to say that, like, you know, while this book is very good, I wouldn't put it in S tier, basically because, like, you know, while this book is fine, it's still fun, there's really not that much of a character arc going on with Thomas. It's just more, again, it's just more like a slice of life book. I could definitely see, you know, the first story, you know, being kind of like a turn off for some people and everything, because yeah, it does drag on a little bit, and I could definitely see people sort of being bored with it. But even then, like, you know, the story is still fine. There's still, like, plenty of funny moments in that story within itself. And after you get done with that story, like, you know, the rest of the three stories are still a blast. And again, there's a reason why, you know, all these stories are still classics with us to this day. So I'm very comfortable to at least put this in A. It is definitely a solid A book right here for me.
I was going to say that this book has something that the other books don't have, and that's humor.
Well, I mean, like, the other books have, like, humor and such, but I get what you mean, like, you know, because even with, like, the three railway engines and Thomas the Tank Engine and everything, actually, no, I take that back. Thomas the Tank Engine still has plenty of fun humor in of itself as well, too. But it's not like, you know, laugh out, but even then, sometimes it's not laugh out loud moments, it's just more like, you know, Thomas being his cheeky self and everything. But with this book and everything, the last really do hit. There are lots of really good, you know, visual gags as well as, like, good wordplay humor. There's definitely a lot of funny banters as well, too, that you still laugh at to this day. It still puts a smile to your face.
I agree. I definitely agree. So this is one where probably we might be a little bit different. Tank Engine Thomas, again, I feel it's like the perfect follow-up to Thomas the Tank Engine. I'm going to be honest and say that... I'm going to be honest and say that Thomas and the Guard is kind of like the weakest story on the book, but it's still very good. It's still very good to read. And what follows that is like, holy crap, there's a lot of classics, like Thomas Goes Fishing, Thomas Tears in the Snow, and the grand finale, which let's be honest, I bet everybody comes back to this book because of this story, Thomas and Birdie. How can you not love that story?
This is definitely one of the few books where it's like the ending is really good to a slice of life story. it really does cap off on how basically how fun it is to be on Thomas's branch line.
Agreed. Agreed. So, oh wow, this is gonna be tough because I really want to put it in S tier. I really do.
Well, we'll be honest. Okay, how about this? If you do put it in S tier, would you read this more than Thomas the Tank Engine, or would you read Thomas the Tank Engine more than Tank Engine Thomas again? If you were to put it in S.
I will read it more than Thomas the Tank Engine because while Thomas the Tank Engine is overrated and overplayed and everything like that, Tank Engine Thomas again hasn't suffered from the same level of burning out that Thomas the Tank Engine has for me sometimes, if you get what I mean.
No, I definitely do get what you mean by that. All right, so do you still want to put it in S and leave Thomas the Tank Engine in S? Or do you want to put Tank Engine Thomas in S and move Thomas the Tank Engine into A?
I think both deserve to be an S, honestly.
Okay.
So
all right. So I'm gonna basically put this. Okay. So I'm basically gonna put this right before Thomas the Tank Engine, so that way, when you see this book first, you know that you want to read this book more than Thomas the Tank Engine.
I will honestly pick up both books because both books, if both books were to be like an episodic TV movie, then those two really, really go together very well.
They do. They do. They really do go together very well. I definitely do agree with you on that.
And Thomas and Bertie being the finale. Come on, man! Awesome. That's fucking awesome.
It is. It is definitely a very good finale right there. More reason why I put it in the A and everything is that it is still a good book, and I actually do want to read it over and over and over again. It's just more that I wouldn't say it's not epic and such. It's just more down to earth and slice of life and everything. But that doesn't mean that's automatically bad or anything. It is still definitely a very good book to read in of its own and everything. So I'm still very comfortable putting it in A.
I was gonna say I forgot to say something about James the Red Engine, and that is the illustrations. I am the illustrations. I'm not a big fan of C. Reginald Talby's illustrations in that book.
Yeah, they are kind of really. Is either sometimes he makes the engines way too big, or they make them kind of way too small in some of their gears.
I still can't get over where James and Ed were climbing the hill. They look like they're taking a goddamn shit.
Push hard, James. Push hard, James. I'm pushing.
That illustration did not age well. I'm being 100% honest with you.
No, it did not age that well.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I forgot to mention about James the Red Engine. So let's move on to Troublesome Images, and this is going to be a fun one.
So Troublesome Mansion was another one where I was about ready to put it into D, but when thinking about this more in and of its own, this book, sometimes I go back and forth on which book suffers the worst, James the Red Engine or Troublesome Mansion in terms of stories. Because the problem with James the Red Engine, as Bonnie mentioned, the reason why that book failed was because, as he said, Audrey was basically put on a very strict time limit to finish that book right now, so he didn't have time to basically give us details of what's going on with James or give him a proper arc and such. Whereas with Troublesome Engines, the reason why this book sometimes doesn't work in of itself is that it has a theme, but as we mentioned in the episode in of itself, and actually, fun fact, by the time we're recording this, I actually just finished editing that audio to Troublesome Mansions and everything, and basically what we said and the reason why this book didn't work in of itself is that it has a theme, but at the same time, Audrey doesn't really stick to the theme as well. There is build up, there is actual proper build up to the theme, but then once you actually get to the theme in of itself, it's just drop altogether and everything, and you're just left scratching your head, basically wondering if again, I also mentioned this too, if Audrey really wanted to basically make this book about the strike in of itself, then he kind of failed pretty hard in that regard, because
if you guys remember back in the episode in Troublesome Engines, he basically right at the very beginning of the story, the striper just kind of disappears because Edward's doing the shunting, and the bigger engine like, well, he's doing the shunting, so might as well go ahead and do our jobs.
Basically bring this joke back. I could just imagine Gordon. I could just imagine Gordon being like, "Oh, don't worry, he's not gonna get another engine to shunt for us." So Top of Hat brings Edward, and Gordon's just like, "Shit, we promised." And it's just
it's frustrating.
And then the story just loosened of itself. But basically, right there, the strike plot is just meaningless. And once we get to the final story and everything, it still just
doesn't really matter.
Scratching and confused, and that much like James Mansion, you're kind of well, I read a book, but I don't know what the point, what this book is trying to get at, and because of that, now that when I read these stories and knowing what's going to happen, it really does feel like it really does feel like Audrey didn't really want to write about a book about strike. He just really wanted to write a book about what how was the main line, how the main line has been ever since Thomas had his branch line and everything, and we just follow the big engines messing up big time to where they're just throwing temper tantrums and such because they don't have the shunting engine anymore. It
pretty much.
Yeah, it is kind of very sad. So, I mean, I'm still gonna put it in F, but I'm kind of thinking which one would I
would leave it. I would leave it in F because when the strike part
I'm still gonna put it in F, but I'm just thinking because again with James the Red Engine, the reason the book failed is because while the stories are simple and there's still some one or two good moments in each of the stories and everything, because again it's a book that has no meat to it. And because there's no meat to it, you really do feel like, it's just, you just basically wasted your time reading a book that basically, it doesn't really give you as much to offer. But at least with, Troublesome Mansion and such, it actually does have a proper, in some ways it does have a proper arc. Even if the theme is not present in of itself, it still has a theme, and it still has an arc to where, you are interested in reading more and wondering where the story is going to go. So actually, yeah, you know what? I think Troublesome Mansions is actually better than James the Red Engine. It's still an F, and it actually still fails to it still fails to meet the message it was trying to get across, or at least meet the theme and everything. But at least it actually does have a structure in some way, and I actually do prefer to read this book more than James the Red Engine. So I'm still gonna put it in an F, but I'm comfortable in saying that it's much better than James the Red Engine in my opinion.
Okay, okay. So for me. Basically, the book starts off strong with Henry and the Elephant. Actually, this is the book that made me gain confidence in that story because you guys remember, for the ones that don't know, that episode scared the crap out of me when I was younger. So basically, this story kind of gave me confidence to read it, and then it's you can go back and watch the episode, and then I watched it, and it's I was scared. I was scared because of nothing.
To be fair, like I said, I don't blame you for being scared of the TV episode, because the TV episode actually does a really great job with, the camera and the directing to make it feel to make you feel just as worried as scared as the workmen that are going in the tunnel, and also just as worried as scared for Henry, because again, to an engine that's probably never seen an elevator for the real time, just oh shit, the fuck's that? Is it gonna kill me?
That's not what scared me. The thing that scared me was the elephant itself.
Yeah, because I remember you saying you thought that the cake was eating looked like an eye.
It looks like a fucking eye. It looks like a fucking eye. Still, I'm still waiting. Now I'm not scared, but I still love when Michelangelo says the workman gave him some cake, and then that music. Oh God, he's eating an eye. George
Carlin also sounds like he's taking a fart when he's basically narrating that part.
I prefer Michelangelo's narrating that episode because it's just so bad the way he does the elephant. It's oh! But I will admit, George Carlin did a fantastic job in that episode.
He did.
He really did. For the worst for me, because the elephant sound he made really scared the crap out of me. But now I think he did a better job than Angelus. Because comparing it to Angelus's narration, damn, George Carlin destroys him.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there.
Yeah. So anyway, then we move on to Tenders and Turntables. Tenders and Turntables is a pretty good second story. That I don't have a problem with. And then we get to Troublesome Mansion, Trouble in the Shed. I'm sorry about that. Trouble in the Shed, and yeah, that's when I get frustrated because the strike plot kind of drops after Edward comes in. It's like, well, he's doing our job, so I guess we can go back and do our jobs. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating, honestly. And the ending, you're left with that kind of frustration that the ending doesn't really matter, honestly.
Pretty
The thing that
much,
saves
like,
this book from
because just pretty much after that point, like, even if Chopin had, like, shuts up the engine in the shed, like, you basically know they're just gonna come out in the end anyway and everything. And I mean, in a way, like, again, TV series actually does do a good job in showing them that, like, they actually do feel bad about, like, what they did to, like, Thomas, Percy, and Edward and all that. But then when you get to, like, reading the Railway series and everything, again, like, you kind of don't, I mean, you kind of do feel like, especially with Johnny Morris, because, again, Johnny Morris actually does do a good job on, like, giving the emotion out of the engines and everything that actually, does feel sorry and do want to work again and everything. So I guess it's just one of those, like, do you feel the ending is satisfying, knowing that, like, the strike plot is dropped, or do you wish that, like, there was more to it?
I honestly get frustrated because this book had potential. It really had potential to showcase what would have happened if the railway did lose money, but instead what we got is a disaster.
Yeah.
No pun intended. And the thing that saves this book for me is Percy. Percy's introduction was so good that it saves me from calling it the worst book on today's list. It's still an F. Don't get me wrong. The strike plot. It's still an F. Don't get me wrong. It's still an F. But
right,
it's not the worst.
Or worse than James the Red Engine?
That's such a really good question.
Because like I said, think about this. Would you rather read James the Red Engine, a book where, again, has story but no meat to it, or would you rather read Troublesome Mansion where again it has a theme but sometimes the theme is just dropped way too early and such, but at least has structure?
Definitely read Troublesome Engines over James the Red Engine any day. Because James the Red Engine's stories, well, they're not bad. They're just kind of a torture to read. While Troublesome Engines, I can get through them, with no problem at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really kind of sad because Troublesome Engines was one of my favorite books when I was a kid. This was still one of my favorite books, and now reviewing it as an adult and calling it an F is really sad, honestly. Because I really love this book. I really do. But analyzing critically, it really suffers to the point where, it's almost impossible to ignore the flaws. And it's just sad, honestly.
I mean, it is sad, but like I told you that, like, sometimes you just gotta treat these books like, they were your own children or your own, best friends. Where it's just like, you love them and everything. They mean no harm. But sometimes you gotta call them out on their flaws and everything, so that way they can grow to be a better person.
Yeah, it's still not the worst Railway series book I've ever read. It's bad because of the flaws, but I will take it over the later books like some of Christopher's books. But we'll get to that. Well, that's another topic for another day.
Alrighty.
All right.
So next is Henry the Green Engine. Alright, so Henry the Green Engine, actually, now that I'm thinking about this is another one where I'm gonna need to think long and hard. It's definitely not a bad book, not nowhere near the D or F category, by a long shot, and such. But again, like, going back to both our episodes and our thoughts on the book, and remembering, like, the Railway Series podcast thoughts on this book and everything, I still do agree with them that the structure of this book definitely could have been better, and such. I still love this arc. I still love this arc that Henry is going through. I think this book does a much better job in, like, showing Henry who he is as a character than any of the other books we've seen of him up until this point, and such. I mean, like I said, Audrey does a really good job of making Henry, a sympathy character and such. A character where
sympathetic.
Yeah. Sympathetic. That's the one. That's the word. He does a really good job in in basically wanting us to see Henry succeed. He sometimes he does do a good job that because again, even in the first story, where he definitely finally gets the special coal and everything, and he's finally running again, and he's happy again. You're happy for him and such. You're happy that, he gets to work again. You're happy that, he could pull trains again. I still think the TV series does a much better job in showing it and everything, due to, like, them, due to them knowing where, due to them knowing that Henry's going to get the special coal later on down the road and everything. But again, even in the Railway series, he does do a very good job in showing, Henry's sympathy side and everything. And he actually, and again, the second story is still a very good story. I still love The Flying Camper to this day. I don't care what anyone else says. Yeah, yes, it's overrated. I can understand that. And yes, I do agree that maybe, like, it definitely should have been in a better spot and everything. But the illustrations and any time that I read that book and that crash is still epic to me to this day. But I do agree that after when you get done with The Flying Kipper, the book itself is just more slice of life now, instead of just, like, an overarching story. There are still some good stories. Gordon's Whistle is still funny to me. And yes, while I do agree that Percy and the Trousers, is a very weird place to be in this book, and it is very short, I still smile at this story to that day. And Henry Sneeze, again, like, it's not a bad story in of itself. There are still some plenty good moments that, like, all the stories do offer. But I do agree, like, I do think The Flying Kipper should have been at least the last story or the second to last story. It probably could have been the second to the last story and made, Henry Sneeze, actually a bit more, feel connected and such. Whereas in the end, like, with the way these stories are featured in this book, I do admit, it does feel jumble in a sort of way. And because of that, actually, as much as I do want to put it into B tier, because, like I said, the stories in of itself are still actually very good. They still do make me smile to this day and everything. I'm gonna put it in C, but it's definitely better than the 3 Railway Engines by a long shot. I would still actually read this book way more than the 3 Railway Engines, to be honest.
Okay, so this is the first one where we're actually gonna have different, second one that we're gonna have different opinions on, because Henry the Great Engine for me is a B tier.
Okay,
definitely a B tier. We start off strong with Cole. Cole is definitely one of my favorite stories on the book. Mm-hmm. If you guys remember, I think I gave it a 9, if I'm not mistaken. I gave it a 9.
Yes, and there's a reason, a 9 or a 10, one of the two.
Yeah, there's a reason why that story works, is because you definitely feel sorry for what Henry's going through, and then when he gets the special coal, you're kind of wondering, like, oh shit, is he actually gonna get better? And in the end, when he gets better, you're just so happy for him. Now we get to the Flying Keeper. Now the Flying Keeper, this is one where I'm gonna have a very controversial opinion. And people can kill me for it, but I have to be honest with myself. That story is overrated for me, but it's still a classic regardless. Mm-hmm. There's one thing I don't like that I actually think the TV series does a much better job. In the original story, if you guys remember, the fireman, there's who cares? Just good cocoa, and then he complains about losing the cocoa. And that kind of ruins the moment for me, because Henry just had a crash, and then we're basically just focusing on that stupid. Yeah,
I do agree. I do agree. While I still think it is a funny moment and everything, I do understand where some are coming from, and that, like, it kind of wasn't really. It really does kill the mood, and what's supposed to be, like, basically a dramatic and sad scene right there.
It's funny. I will admit, it is very funny. But I do prefer what the TV series does, where after Henry crashes, there's complete silence, and then you're just left in shock to absorb what happened.
Yeah, I agree. On screen. I agree with you right there.
So Flying Keeper is still a classic, and when Henry comes back in a black, shaped as a black 5, that feeling of satisfaction is just so good. And then we get to Gordon's Whistle, and Gordon's Whistle is possibly one of the funniest Railway series stories I've ever read. Gordon is a big asshole, and he gets the karma for talking shit about Henry. He got what he deserved. So that story is a classic to me. Percy and the Trousers. What the fuck is that doing here? But I don't care. It's very short, and that's kind of the weakest story for me on the book, because I don't know why the fuck is it in the book, to be honest. But it's fun. It's a fun little harmless story, so I don't mind. And then we get to Henry Sneeze, and Henry Sneeze, I agree with what the Railway Series Book Club said and what you said. It should have been placed somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Because it really does not feel like a proper ending. it kind of feels like something that will belong in the middle of the book. Now that I went back and actually took a look at that story again,
I think what they could have done, I think what they could have done if they were to put it in the middle, I think they should have put it somewhere between Gordon Squizzles and Percy in the trousers. Or what they also could have done is that after Percy, basically moved the flying camper to after, Percy in the trousers, and then, like, instead of, like, the other story being about Gordon being jealous, it could be about, like, because Henry has a new shape and everything, he's still, getting used to, like, having regular Cole again, and you can actually, tie that into, like, how Henry uses the regular Cole to his advantage to get back at the boys, and that actually would feel like, a proper ending right there.
I would put Henry's niece probably after Cole, because Henry's niece could be a little backstory as to why Henry was suffering so bad. If it was rewritten a little bit, I think it would have worked better after Cole.
Actually, I do agree with you. That placement is actually not bad. I could actually see that being. I could actually see that story being being after Cole.
Yeah. Aside from the goddamn controversy that I think everybody is already tired of hearing about.
Yeah.
The story. Henry's niece, to me, it's a satisfying ending for what it is. So with all that added up, I think Henry has a solid arc in this book. And while it may not be as good as, let's say, Thomas's character arc, I still think it's a pretty good character arc that I think the book deserves to be on B tier for me.
I do agree. Like, even though that I think that, like, the arc at least could have been structured better, at least it is still an arc. You can still feel an arc being present in there in some way, and at the end of the day, it's still a good arc, and I still enjoyed this book myself too.
And I'm going to be honest, Henry has a much better arc than Gordon, and we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes.
But I guess we'll wait till we get to that book itself.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But first, we got a favorite character of mine, and I'm very excited for this book.
Yeah, Grandpa Toby. All right, you know what? Okay, actually, you know what? I'm going to give my rating for this. I'm going to try to give it. I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet, so that way, Barney can go ahead and gush about how much he loves Toby and such. Toby to me is an A. But to be honest, I think Tengen Thomas again actually does a little bit more of a better job in basically, like, story structures than Toby the Tram Engine. But Toby the Tram Engine is still a very solid story. It actually does a really good job at introducing, Toby as well as his whole branch line and everything. It does a good job on basically showing Toby as a character. You actually feeling really attached to Toby from the very first story, and that's actually a good sign right there because once you learn that his branch line is closing down, you actually want to see Toby, get a happy ending in the end. And in the end, he actually does, get a happy ending. And basically, the rest of the stories where it features Toby actually uses him to his advantage very well. The only reason why this is in A tier and why I think, Thomas the Tank Engine again is better than Toby the Tram Engine, it is more just to do with the last story, because the last story really, really could have, worked better if basically Audrey just used Toby to have Toby, be told who Mrs. Kindly is instead of just, Thomas, because the last story really does lose focus on, like, on basically, like, Toby itself as a character and such, and it does suffer a little bit, but at the end of the day, like, all the stories are are still very good. I still enjoy them from time to time, and honestly, reading this book again, like, it's another book that actually does get put a good smile to my face. So yeah, I'm putting this in A. But go ahead.
Okay. So Toby the Tram Engine is an A for me. It's not an S, and I'll explain why. It's not an S because I agree. I actually went back and took a look at Mrs. Kindly's Christmas again, and the more that I read it, I kind of agreed that it just felt a little bit incomplete in a sort of way.
It does.
It just didn't feel like a proper ending to Toby as a character. It just felt like it just basically felt more like a Thomas story than a Toby story in the end.
Exactly,
and honestly, The story doesn't have anything to do with Toby. I think Toby only has one line, and that's basically a peep peep, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just basically a PP, and it's like, okay, where's my check?
You only get £1.
he gets 1 pound. He gets £1, and Toby is just like, I knew I should have stayed in Archdale.
So now, why do I love Toby so damn much that he's the front face of my channel? Well, Toby is a very underappreciated character in my opinion. He's the character that has like the least appearances, and he only gets a spotlight every once in a while. And after reading the book, it just feels like a really good book about him. You know, it's fun seeing him. It's fun seeing his life from the very beginning when he was in London to after he gets back to after he gets bought and goes to Sodor, and you know, it's fun seeing him. You know, how can I put this?
It's just basically fun seeing him, like, you know, basically interacting with all like the other all the other engines that he gets to meet and such. Basically, like from the very first story and everything, like we know that basically Thomas at first, you know, was jealous of Toby and everything, but after Toby, you know, rang the bell and frightened the policeman and everything, they actually became very good friends and everything. And even with Dirty Objects and everything, seeing him, you know, interacting with James, that is still a very, you know, funny scene to this day. And even his interaction with Percy is a very cute one too. It's almost kind of like, you know, a grandpa bonding with, like, you know, a grandpa bonding with like a grandson or something.
Pretty much, and Toby's interactions is what sells the book for me, if that makes any sense. I do see where you're coming from with that. Yeah. So I do love Toby and the Stout Gentleman. Toby and the Stout Gentleman is still one of my favorite stories ever. I'm still kind of upset that Johnny Morris skipped the part where Bridget had offended Toby. But to be honest, the rest of the narration was so good that I actually do not mind. Then we get Thomas in Trouble, and Thomas in Trouble, I still have my faults with it. I think that policeman was a big asshole, trying to impose out of date laws that were no longer in use. But I do feel like that story could have been a little bit better as to give a reason as to why Toby was brought to Sodor. But it's still good regardless.
Honestly, thinking on it, the only other way I can see Toby being brought to Sodor, if let's say the policeman wasn't there, is if Audrey wanted to do a really grim story about how, you know, Thomas accidentally kills a cow or kills an animal on a track because he doesn't have cow catchers and such, and he gets in trouble with the police, and that's the reason why Sir Thomas brings Toby to begin with. But even then, if Audrey was to go that route, I can imagine a lot of parents writing angry letters to him. So I think it's a good idea. He went with the other route, where it's just like, you know, the policeman is just being an asshole.
Yeah, he went the safe route, and to be honest, I'm kind of satisfied with that. But I do feel like it could have been a little bit better, honestly.
I mean, maybe it could have been executed a little better, but at the same time, I really can't think of any other way of, like, you know, how could he bring Toby to Sodor without, you know, being like, you know, he's just there with no reason whatsoever, or at least, you know, seem like it was force. That Toby was just brought to Sodor by kind of force and such.
Yeah, and then we get Dirty Objects, which Dirty Objects is a classic. James got the karma he deserved for being a racist to Toby. Well, not really racist, but just saying it for farts and giggles, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's just basically James being a jerk to Toby for no reason because he's brown.
Pretty much. And then I think I already talked about Mrs. Kindness Christmas, and it just doesn't feel like a Toby story. It doesn't feel like a Toby story, and it really has no place in the book, honestly. Mm-hmm. So that kind of updates my opinion on my original opinion on the book.
Alrighty. So before we get to Gordon the Big Engine, we did a story in between Toby and Gordon, which is Thomas's Christmas Party. And I'm gonna be completely honest. While I do like the story in of itself and everything, there are still very good moments and such. I'm sorry, I'm going to put it in C, and I'm going to put it in between Henry and the Three Railway Engines and such. It is still a good story in of itself, and I actually do like how Wilbur Audrey took Britton Davis' idea and worked it into the Railway series universe and everything. And I think he did a really good job in trying to keep the continuity in both Railway series based on where like this story is taking place and everything. Even though the big shed with the turntables still causes like
continuity issues.
Yes, basic continuity issues. Even though that part still brings continuity issues and everything, the illustrations are still really good. Like there's still some really solid illustrations from this book. The story is nice and simple. Again, it definitely does give you the Christmas feel and everything. It definitely has a beginning, middle, and end, and the ending is still, very satisfying with the party and even with the engines going to sleep and everything. Again, like this book actually does do a very good job of giving you a feel of a party way more than the TV series did and such. Not to drag on the TV series too much, because the TV series version is still pretty good. But being honest, like, while this book is still good, it's not a book that honestly I want to read over and over again too much. Maybe I might read it once in a while. Maybe I might read it like if I want to read a good Christmas book and such. If I feel in a holiday mood, but it's not really a book I want to read on its own after Christmas. If that makes any sense, it's fine. It's passable. I still do like it, but honestly, it's not really my most favorite book out of the whole Railway series.
Okay, so that's okay. That's okay, honestly. For me, after what you said, I'm kind of leaning towards what you said. I'm gonna have to put it in B, and this is gonna be a little bit,
You said D.
B.
Oh, B. Okay. Would you read this more than Henry the Green Engine, or would you read Henry the Green Engine more?
No, I will read Henry the Green Engine more.
Okay.
By a long shot.
All right.
And the reason being is because while I do love that he actually incorporated elements of the Railway series into the story, the TV series does a much better job with that episode. Because while I do like that Wilbur Otter expanded the story a little bit, I don't know. I kind of prefer the TV series more because
Well, okay. Honestly, I do get what you're saying. It is one of those where it's just like both have their pros and cons. TV series has its pros. If you're just looking for a short, simple, sweet, Christmas story with nice visuals and nice music, to go along with it and everything. The only con is that, like, because it is short, it doesn't really give much time to, like, expand on the story too much, and you do feel like you're missing a lot of details, in between some of the parts that the TV series version does. Whereas in the Railway series, like, it gives you the much-needed details that you're looking for. The illustrations are very nice and everything. Again, it definitely does give off a more, party feel and everything once you get to the end of the book. But the con with this book is that, it sometimes feels too simple to a fault to where, again, it's a story where after you read it, you kind of only want to read it during the holidays, but you don't want to read it on its own, if that makes any sense.
Yes, and it doesn't help that it's missing a very key element that the TV series has. Can I say it?
I think I know where it is, but go ahead.
Where's the music, man?
Where's the music, man? Where's the it's interesting that you brought it up. I'm actually kind of a little surprised that none of these, Railway series, spin-offs have any audio for them. Because considering that, like, Ted Robinson, like, was basically narrating, Chris's stories at the time. I'm kind of surprised he didn't narrate any of these spin-offs.
Yeah, none of the spin-offs actually were narrated by Ted Robbins, actually. So that's actually one of the rarities where if you want to have an audiobook, you have to listen to a fan read the story. Which is kind of, of course, it's great. Don't get me wrong, but Ted Robbins kind of missed that opportunity because that story is a classic, and not reading it not having recorded an audiobook for it kind of makes it feel lacking in a sort of way.
Yeah, I do get what you're saying with that.
Yeah, so basically, without the music, without the key element that the TV version had, which is the music. I don't know. That makes me kind of lean towards the TV series, the TV episode more than the actual book. Well, I do love the book. The book. I love it a lot because it expands a little bit more on the story. But at the end of the day, I kind of prefer the TV episode. So that's it. All right.
Last one. Gordon the Big Engine. So if you remember in our very last episode, Gordon the Big Engine, at first, we were saying high praises. The first 3 stories, we were saying high praises to most of the stories. And then the last story happened, and we were just like, we just wanted to burn this book on fire. We were basically very, very harsh, way more harsh than we could. And that story so far is the only story where basically both of us gave no ratings. We basically gave that one a 0, and that really hurted its final grade. That really destroyed it. But for me, at first originally I gave it an F, but after thinking on this book long and hard, I'm actually going to put it in D tier. And the reason why I'm going to put it in D tier is simple. Yes, the ending, Pain Pasta Queens is still a very lacking. It's probably even more worse ending than James and the Express or Percy Runs Away or pretty much any other endings that we had on this Railway Series book as a whole. Because at least even if the endings in some of the Railway Series books were lacking, it still felt like an ending in some way, shape, or form. It still felt like the book had a nice conclusion to end off on. Whereas with Gordon the Big Engine and Pain Pasta Queens, the ending doesn't really feel satisfying. This is really the most like lacklusting ending, the most open-ended feel where you really just want more. And honestly, that's not a good sign right there. But the reason why I'm putting this in the D is that at least with the first 3 stories, the 3 stories actually did a really good job in setting up Gordon's arc. All of them have really done a fantastic job on basically showing Gordon growing as a character, much like, with Thomas Din and Thomas the Tank Engine, or even with Henry and Henry the Green Engine. Each story, like I said, the introduction does a good job on, showing Gordon, still thinking he's all high and mighty and everything, but but then when you get to the end of the first story, you actually do feel, or at least, get an understanding that Gordon does feel bad for what he just did. And again, the TV series, handles that visual so well, where you actually do see in his face that, he feels really bad for what he did. And that's basically how the other 2 stories handle their endings. They handle their endings in such, they basically handle their endings in a way where you do feel the satisfying ending as such, but it's still open enough for you to where you want to read more and you want to see Gordon growing more as a character. And Leaves, like I said, even though if Leaves' ending might be confusing for some, I think the way they ended that story in Leaves was really good. Just seeing Gordon, being happy that I got to help out, but he knows he's not, out of the woods just yet. It does a really good job on leaving that little arc still continuing in the next story down the line. And again, that's another reason why I'm putting this in D as well too. While Down the Line ending is still good, especially with that grand illustration and everything. Again, because of the alliance subplot that has happened, and because the alliance pretty much went nowhere in the last story, and that was another reason why that story failed for me. Basically when we first read the story. In the last episode and everything, and again, we all know how I felt with Pain Pasta Queen, so the less I say on that, the better and everything, but that's the reason why I'm putting it into D, because even though the ending still failed really hard and everything, the other 3 stories felt complete, at least. Each felt complete. They actually did connect to one another really well, that in a way, I can overlook a little bit on the ending, but I can't overlook it that much to where I feel comfortable putting it as C. So I think a solid D. Is where this book should go. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I think we all know where you're gonna put this book in. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's just that I remember when we were recording the episode, and I remember when you said, "I don't feel proud for that." And that's true. I don't feel proud for Thomas, Edward, and Gordon in the final story. Yeah. I feel ripped off.
Again, just go back to that last episode. We really did feel ripped off. It really did feel ripped off when we got to that end of the story and everything. And we were again, if we were live in 1953, And if we read this story, we probably would want our money back.
I would probably return the book if we were alive in 1953. If we were to do like,
again, it's more of a joke, but I kind of feel sorry for that kid Ian. If basically he received this book, it's like his birthday present. Dear Ian, you wanted a book about Gordon? Here you go. Happy birthday.
Such a fucking mediocre book, honestly.
It is. You know what? I do hardly agree. It is a very mediocre book in of itself. And again, that's another reason why, right, I can't. I'm not comfortable putting it as C.
Me neither. So before I put it, I rank it in the tier list. Let's talk about the stories a little bit. We start off strong with Off the Rails. Off the Rails is possibly the funniest railway series story I've ever read. The title is fucking perfect. The story is structured well. And what makes me laugh so hard is that the fact controller is like, Gordon didn't want to take the special train and run into a ditch. Oh, I see. What's that? You want the special's waiting? Well, tell him we're taking. And Gordon, leave it the fuck where he is. We don't have time to bother with this goddamn asshole. That's basically
what he gets for wasting all my goddamn money.
It's cruel, yes, but I fucking love it because he fucking deserved it.
He does.
It's that story makes that scene alone makes me love the story to the point where I felt like I needed to give it a 10 because it's the funniest railway series story I've ever read. And and the reason I come back to this book is because of that particular story. Even Johnny Morris did a fantastic job reading it.
He did,
especially adding the animal sounds. It's like, well, now frogs can talk. And then we get to Leaves, and Leaves is a little bit of a letdown, but it's still not the worst letdown the book had to offer. Leaves was good, but it just felt a little bit, compared to what came before it, it just felt a little bit...
It felt... I do agree. I do agree. And that, while Leaves is still good, it is one of those stories where it's like, you do feel like there could have been a little bit more added. There were some points where I do admit, it did drag on a little bit. It did feel like there were some parts that was lacking, in a way. But to me, with Leaves, again, it makes up with both the ending and even with, some of the illustrations as well.
Yeah, I do love the illustration where James is struggling on the hill. That's actually one of my favorite C original Dobby illustrations. Mm-hmm. My favorite one's coming up in the next story. But yeah, Leaves, while it wasn't as good as what came before it, I still think it's a pretty good story for what it was trying to do. And obviously it destroys the TV episode because I actually rewatched it a couple days ago, and I just feel the first half kind of feels strange in a way. So Leaves, while it wasn't as good as what came before it, I still think it was pretty good. Down the Mine, come on, it's a classic. Down the Mine is a classic, but the Alliance part,
yeah.
That wasn't needed, honestly. Maybe if it was for maybe if it was for what the TV series is like, you help me, I'll help you, basically, and then basically they leave. If it was to last for just that scene, that would have been great. I wouldn't have mind,
I wouldn't have mind, if they were going to do the Alliance, I would have had Down the Mine be the second story and have Leaves be the third, and just replace James with Thomas.
Yeah, if you're gonna have the Alliance part, then do what we should have done what you just said. Put Down the Mine first and then Leaves second.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do it just for a little cute moment, then put it there. If it's for a cute moment, then put it there. It's perfect. It's perfect as it is. And then we get to Paint Pots and Queens.
The story where basically Audrey is just like, Gordon? Who's Gordon?
I honestly feel that story was kind of written as an excuse because of the coronation, because of Queen Elizabeth's coronation happening around the same time. And while that's great because they were getting a new queen, they were getting a new monarch at the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's great and all. I just feel like that doesn't excuse the fact that this is a book about Gordon, and
Yeah.
that story comes and then it just destroys the concept of the book. It's Troublesome Images all over again.
It is. It's Troublesome Mansion all over again, but worse.
Much worse. Much worse. And let's talk about that scene about Henry and the painter. That scene was just stupid. It was very stupid.
Well, Henry, like, you know, we could easily just wash the paint off of your boiler and everything. But you know what? Fuck you. I'm gonna get someone else to pull the royal train. I'm the fog controller, bitch.
That fucking felt ridiculous. That was kind of upsetting in a way, for me at least. I don't know about you.
I do agree with you there. Again, like I think what could have really worked the story better again, to give a proper satisfying ending, is that drop the alliance and have Henry still pull the royal train, but have him break down and have Gordon, you know, bring Henry and the royal train back in, not because of, like, you know, he wants to do it to show off, but because he wants to do it for the railway itself. And again, you know, that would have had a much better satisfying ending of Gordon being able to pull the express again.
Pretty much. And then comes the stupid part, you know, that really angers me to no end. Yeah. And that's basically the point. That's basically where Thomas and Gordon, you know, can Gordon have his coaches back and Thomas have his branch line? Since when the hell Thomas lost his goddamn branch line?
Yeah.
It makes zero sense. And then the story just kind of forgets that Gordon even exists. And you know, that's it. You know, I don't feel proud for Thomas, Edward, and Gordon. I don't feel proud for them. I feel ripped off. That ending was just fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. I do agree with you, and you know what? I still sense that you still feel ripped off. Now that we're talking about this book again, I still get that sense that you're feeling ripped off again.
And you know, I just thinking about the story makes me angry. You know, it puts me in a bad mood because that story, the story could have been good. I see the potential. I see the potential in the story, but you know, since the coronation, of course, with no disrespect, of course.
Go ahead.
But since the coronation was taking place around the same time the book was being written, you know, it just felt like an excuse. It just felt like an excuse to shoehorn the part where where Queen Elizabeth II visits the island.
It does.
And you know, and then you know, there comes the ending, and then you just left so mad. You just left with such frustration that you just want to rip the book apart, or just take it back for a refund. It's that bad. That's the first time where I've actually felt angry reading a story. At least with Troublesome Trucks, while it was a torture to get through, it still felt like a story. It still had a proper beginning, middle, and end.
And you know what? Yeah. Now that you mention it, at least with that story, you do feel satisfied. You do feel proud for James. You feel like he earned, like, you know, getting a spread, having a spread coat, you know, being stayed on him.
Yeah, but then comes Cream Pots and Queens, and then basically it's like, who the fuck is Gordon?
I mean, I guess, you know what, Gordon, you know what, yeah, I guess I could just give you the coaches again. And I could just imagine Gordon being like, wait, what? You could have done this
and honestly,
you could have done this whole time. Why did you make me shun trucks? Because reasons.
It just feel it's just so infuriating. It makes me angry, so fucking angry. Because the story could have been good, but since the coronation was taking place around the time, it just felt like an excuse to shoehorn the Queen's visit. And you know, while I'm not against that, this book is about Gordon. It's supposed to be about Gordon. It's not supposed to be about, you know. So anyway, where am I gonna place it? Since I rambled on for a little bit long. Well,
I think long and hard. Like, I mean, obviously you're gonna give it a low grade, but but compared to like these other three books right here that has low grades and such, out of any of these books, is there any book where you felt like you would rather read Gordon the Big Engine more, or do you think Gordon the Big Engine is so bad that you would actually read these three books first before reading this book again?
That's actually really tough because, like I said, Off the Rails, I come back to this book very often because of Off the Rails. And while I don't read Leaves and Down the Mine as much as Off the Rails, wow, this is going to be tough. On the one hand, I want to put it in F because after reading Paint Pots and Queens, this book leaves me with such fury that I just want to rip it apart. But then there's the other three stories that are pretty good. Mm-hmm. So you know what?
It's up to you. If you want to put it in F, then you can either put this book in front of Troublesome Mansions and James the Red Engine. You could put it in between Troublesome Mansion and James the Red Engine, or you could put it after Troublesome Mansion and James the Red Engine. Or if you want to put it in D, then you just need to tell me, would you rather read this more than the 3 railway engines, or would you rather read the 3 railway engines more if you were to put it in D?
Okay. So, wow, this is going to be tough.
Because you just said yourself.
For now, yeah, go ahead. You were going to say, sorry?
I was just basically going to say, you kind of almost have the same opinion as me, and that, like, the first 3 stories do make this book good. It does make this book work. But then that final story just basically makes all the effort that the first 3 stories was going for wasted.
Yeah, you know what? Put it in F.
All right. Would you rather read this more than the first 2 books in between or after?
Yep. Put it at first, at the very beginning.
Let's see if I can. Okay, there we go.
There we go. Now going to Big Engine might move position as time goes on because I might return to the book and give it another read. But for now, F is the place where I'm most comfortable putting it on.
Alrighty. Alright, so far, this is our tier list in terms of Season 1 as a whole. So, alright, so looking at your tier list, again, I'm not going to bring out my calculator, because fuck that. I'm not really going to rate this, but alright, if we can see right here, so far in terms of Season 1, the ones that has the most, grades, we have 3 books here that are in F. You have 1 that's in D, nothing for C just yet. You have 2 for B, 1 for A, and 1 for S. So far, these 4 books right here. Look, if you take a look at this, it's almost kind of a tie in a sort of way. We have 4 books right here on your end that basically fall into, like, let's say, the good tier list, and then we have these, 4 books right here that falls into, like, the bad tier list. So technically, if we were to put, the first Railway series, podcast into a tier list in of itself, would you be comfortable in putting it in, like, a C for overall?
The season overall, for me, for Season 1 of the Really Useful Podcast, for me, if I had to rate it, I'm in between a B or a C. So...
If I were you, I would probably put it in C, to be honest, just given, like, how even, like, the good books versus the bad books are. Because, like I said, this is pretty even right here.
You know what? Yeah, C is a pretty satisfying start, to be honest with you.
Alrighty. And if we were
Yeah.
Okay, you first.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that C is still a pretty satisfying start to this whole, podcast that we're doing.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
Alright, now you.
Yeah, so take a look at my tier list. Alright, so far I only have 3 books here that are, like, let's just say C is meh. C is meh, and so far these 3 books pretty much, win in the meh category. I have 3 right here that are considered good, and also 3 right here that are considered bad. So mine is also very even in of itself. So basically, if I was to rate Season 1, I think I would also be comfortable in putting it somewhere between a B or a C. So for now, I'm going to put it in if we were to put, the podcast in the tier list in of itself, I would probably put it in C for the first season. So pretty much our tier list, like, while they're different in of itself in terms of, like, the grades, it's kind of similar in a sort of sense. And that like, all of our tiers are pretty much even.
Yeah, Season 1 for me, I would call Season 1 of this podcast the very beginning, and let me explain why. We're still kind of trying to figure out how we were going to do this, and if you could go back and watch the first episode, we were still kind of trying to figure out, okay, how are we gonna do this?
Mm-hmm.
How are we gonna rate the books and everything? But as time went on, we just we really got comfortable with what we were doing, and we really showed confidence in this podcast. And season one, I would call it a pretty satisfying beginning. What about you?
Same here. You know what? I am definitely looking forward to when we get to like the next 8 books in season 2. I'm also kind of curious to see like what our grades are going to be in terms of like first impressions, and what's going to be our final grade once we put those into the tier list.
Yeah, this was a lot of hard work. This podcast was a lot of hard work.
It was. It definitely was.
It took us a lot. It took us plenty of time to actually read the books and everything. But in my opinion, the wait was worth it because we had a lot of fun filming the episodes, especially Gordon the Big Engine. Gordon the Big Engine was my favorite episode to film, especially when we had that breakdown because of Paint Pots and Queens.
Yeah, me too. My highlight, in terms of my highlight, one of my favorite episodes for the podcast we've done on this so far, Going to Big Engine is one of them, and James the Red Engine actually comes a little second because that was actually the first book where we were basically just bashing that book, pretty much almost beginning to end and such, and that was actually the first time where we were like, okay, yeah, you know what, I think we will actually treat each of the book in the Railway series with fair and with respect.
Yeah, but and another one of my favorite episodes is Troublesome Mansions because I just love the fact that it's like, okay, so what's your prototype rating? It's like, it's probably gonna get a B or C.
Yeah,
and then we get to the book,
we got to like Trouble in the Sheds, and we got to Percy runs away and everything. We're just like, yeah, this book sucks.
Troublesome Images is still one of my favorite episodes that we filmed because I went into that episode expecting to give the book like a B, but then we got to Trouble in the Shed, and Percy runs away, and then seeing the rating, I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It couldn't be that bad, but then I see the rating, I was like, oh god, it really is that bad.
Yes, it is that bad, Bonnie. You were smoking pot again.
But again, it's still sad that that book, Troublesome Images in particular, that was one of my favorite Railway series books when I was younger, and now reviewing it as an adult with a critical eye, it's still kind of sad that it got an F because I love that book and I really do appreciate it, but sometimes you're just gonna be critical.
You just gotta be honest. You really do have to be honest with yourself in terms of like at one way, here's how I've always review not only Thomas but also all of my other childhood shows. I'm reviewing it both with a critical lens in terms of if I've never seen the show at all and this is my first time seeing it and if it still holds up, as well as seeing it and going back down to memory lane. Is it still as good as I remembered it? Are there still good parts about it I still look forward in going to, and I basically take both of those in mind when reviewing something like this.
Yeah. So one thing I'm actually glad is that we were harsh on some of the books, but that's actually pretty good. That's actually very good because it kind of shows that we're not completely biased towards the books.
Pretty much. And to be fair, even though we were harsh on some of the books, like I said, we really don't hate these books overall. We don't think they're bad or terrible books. It's just basically looking at them in a critical, view. There are some books that are, critically better than others.
Yes. When we get to season 2, we're definitely going to start seeing that because I feel season 2 is going to be a very good season because, the really good books are actually going to be in that season.
Pretty much. Although, like I said, let's not get our hopes up. Let's not get our hopes high up too much. But looking at the next 8 books that looking at the next 8 books that we're going to be reviewing for season 2 and everything, I think only one might get an okay rating and such. But the rest of them I feel like maybe might get somewhat of a good rating somewhere down the line. But we'll basically see.
Always see. Yeah. And with that, guys, season 1 is fully completed.
Yes.
Man.
This was a ride. This was definitely a ride from beginning to end.
I'm kind of sad that the journey ended, but there's another journey that's going to be starting up pretty soon. We're just filling the engine up with coal, and we're gonna get started with season 2 very soon.
Very soon. pretty soon. In season 2, that's definitely. I feel like there's definitely going to be a season where basically the books are definitely going to get better. But again, we'll just have to wait and see when we get to them.
Yeah, don't get our hopes high, because if I get my hopes high, then disaster happens, and that's happened to be a lot, especially in college.
Yeah.
So, Zach, you want to say something before we end off? For the finale episode
The
of
only
season
thing I
one?
just want to say is that I had a lot of fun recording the first season of the Railway series. I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm definitely looking forward to some of the books that are going to be coming up for season 2, especially, some of my favorites coming up pretty soon. But overall, I had a nice time, I had fun, and I hope you guys are looking forward to season 2 when that comes out soon. We don't know when yet. We're aiming to try to do it next year, but it's not 100% promise. Anything could change. But we're definitely looking forward to doing more Railway series with you guys.
Definitely. So with that, guys, thank you so much for watching this retrospective on season 1, where we basically put the books in a tier list. This was a lot of fun to do, and I hope you guys enjoyed season 1 as much as I enjoyed, developing the podcast with Sokola. It was a fun ride, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all again for season 2.
Same here. I'm definitely looking forward to this too. I'm looking forward to doing the tier list again here too. Once we get done with season 2. Again, some of the books in this retrospective, might change a little bit as we once we start reading more Railway series books and everything. But for now, this is basically where the books are going to be staying for now.
Yeah. So with that, guys, thank you for watching, and with that, we'll see you all very soon.
Before we go and everything, don't forget don't forget to check out both of our channels. Check out my main channel if you want to see movie and TV show reviews, or check out my gaming channel where I do Let's Plays. Also check out Barney's channel, or Teapot07, whenever he does videos on that channel ever again, before it starts collecting cobwebs and everything. Or if you guys have any other shows or movies you want us to review on this channel in of itself, let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like, hit subscribe, and with all that, yes, thank you all so much for joining us on the first season of the Railway series, and we'll see you all in the next big project, next review whenever we get to it. So until then, it's been Sakura Diesel with my good friend
Old Teapot7, saying thank you for watching, and thank you so much for joining us throughout this journey of the first season of the Really Useful podcast.
And we'll see you all in the next season and next episode with Edward the Blue Engine whenever we get around to that book. But until then, take care, everyone, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.